Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's a pleasure for me to moderate this session this afternoon with three very distinguished guests. My name is Harold McKay, and my job is to provide some context and introduce the discussion. We're speaking today from the archives room at Notre Dame College in Wilcox, Saskatchewan, in the shadow of a very unique building known as the Tower of God. It was built in the early 1960s and reflected the ecumenical vision of Father Athol Murray, who was the inspirational leader of Notre Dame for almost 50 years. One interior wall of the building is dedicated to each of the three great Abrahamic religions, Islam, Judaism, and Christianity. Its theme is the common belief in one God. In 1975, Father Murray and the Fred Hill family, at the invitation of King Faisal of Saudi Arabia, traveled to Saudi Arabia to discuss Father Murray's emerging idea of establishing a physical ecumenical site in Jerusalem, if you like, a Jerusalem Tower of God. Today's discussion will focus on elements that the Abrahamic religions have in common. It's not our purpose to debate the politics of the Middle East, which has seen dreadful events in recent days with emotions running high. Hopefully, however, conversations such as this may help to foster much-needed interfaith understanding. So let me turn to introduce our participants in today's dialogue. On my left, and first in line for introduction, His Royal Highness Turki Faisal. I welcome you to Saskatchewan.
Thank you.
His Royal Highness is the chairman of the board of the King Faisal Center for Research and Islamic Studies. He's held significant posts during his career in the government of Saudi Arabia, including as head of its General Intelligence Directorate, and later as ambassador to the United Kingdom and the United States. Welcome to the archives.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
Archbishop Donald Bolen is Archbishop of the Regina Archdiocese. He's a champion of ecumenicism and a leader in the important matter of reconciliation with Canada's Indigenous people. Welcome, Archbishop.
Thank you.
Rabbi Parnes is the spiritual leader of the Beth Synagogue in Regina. He's a very active person in community development in our city and a prominent force in advancing interfaith understanding. Welcome.
Thank you.
So it's now for me to frame the opening question and invite the panelists to provide their perspectives. My intent is to let that discussion proceed freely wherever it may go. So let me begin, Archbishop, with a question that you might begin the discussion with.
Sure.
Father Murray's Tower of God gave obviously tangible expression to religious harmony. 60 years later, how do you assess the state of relations among the Abrahamic religions, and to what extent is that ecumenical vision of his, of mutual respect, a reality?
Thanks very much, Harold, and Your Royal Highness, privileged to be with you in this dialogue. Rabbi Jeremey, as always, good to be in conversation with you. I would just want to highlight at the very start how important it is that Jewish, Muslim, and Christian leaders come together to enter into conversation. And while there is a war that is very much on our minds in the Middle East, that points to the absolute and essential character of encountering one another, of being able to talk together and enter deeply into the depths of our faith traditions, which have such resources for peace. There is a profoundly, the Tower of God is an extraordinary place. That it was built in 1960-61 before the Second Vatican Council, when the Catholic Church really opened itself to dialogue with other Christian communities and with other faiths. Where we're at today, well, I think that's a conversation to open up for all of us. But I think our traditions have resources that can help us to identify the faith foundations we hold in common in terms of concern with justice and with peace, with compassion, with reaching out to the neighbor, with love, and with building a society that looks out for the common good and looks out for those on the margins.
One of my main concerns on this question is truly my lack of knowledge of the depth of Christianity and Judaism. So addressing those issues, I will have to rely on what little I know of those religions, but also not being, as it were in Christian terms, a man of the cloth of even Islam as a religion and as a tradition. So please accept from me this limited view of what is going to be exchanged among us in words and other emotions and feelings towards each other and towards the topic we're discussing. Our friend here wants to take himself away from us, but I don't think we should let him.
You always find people like that.
But, back to your question about how we see things today progressing, if you like. Well, if I can say from my perspective, it's an issue of a few steps forward and then a few steps back. Unfortunately, in today's world, the spoilers are also active in trying to influence the progress of understanding and ecumenical engagement, not just between our faiths, but the other faiths as well. And so that is something I think from the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia is very much in the minds of the leadership, that we must be wary of these spoilers, wherever they come from, and not allow them to be at their hands the ability to influence where we are going. And as I mentioned in my presentation earlier to the students, the late King Abdullah established a center for cultural and religious understanding, along with leaders of all the religions in the world, and not just the revealed religions, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. And actually that center is now operating from headquarters in Portugal. But that is not enough. And I think the Vatican, with you mentioned the Vatican II, as following what Father Murray did in building the tower, opened all of us to the view that we should engage with each other. And so that is the principal, I think, tool of meeting these spoilers, is that we should not let them build walls between us.
Here, here. Here, here. Yes. Your Highness, thank you. And I appreciate the term spoilers. It's helpful. There will always be those. But maybe they should only exist to help us be stronger and better at what we do, to bring the faiths together. You know, I think about where we are in the world today, the 21st century. We have commerce that gives us unlimited wealth, but does not tell us what to do with it, how to control it. We have science and technologies that give us enormous advances in our lives and how to live, but the power that gives us, but does not in any way inform us as to how to use that power. We have the political realm, the democracies that we recognize here, that will not, on principle, interfere in how we manage those things. I think that any reasonable thinking person at some point in their lives, hopefully sooner rather than later, will be confronted with three great questions. Who am I? Why am I here? How then should I be in this world? What's my purpose? And I think the only place to find that was within faith. It's the one place that provides us with the opportunity to make the right choices over time. And I think that the spoilers, as you refer, whoever they may be, are there to test us, it feels like, on an ongoing basis. So I think we need to be strong in our faiths, but in our bringing faiths together. Ultimately, we want to recognize our similarities. There are many. Someone said to me, it's interesting that there are so many similarities in the faith. And I'm going, why is that amazing? If it's real, then there should be lots of similarities. And so I welcome the opportunity for us to be able to do this and to have dialogue going forward that will take us in the other direction, in a direction of wholeness and completeness. Actually, is my favorite teacher and rabbi, Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sachs, rest his soul, said that we may begin to appreciate and honor the dignity of our differences. That would be a good place to be.
Mm-hmm. Can I just ask you, what went through your mind as you toured the Tower of God this morning? What did you think of it? And what impression did it make and why?
The first impression was how awesome it is to look at all of this effort of one man to bring three great religions under one roof. This is an awesome accomplishment. And to have thought of it so early, and at a time when people were in the middle of a world that had come out of the Second World War, and in a Cold War with atheism and idolatry opposing the rest of us through the communist regimes that existed at that time. And for that one man to have invented this idea, to be followed later on by the three religions, basically, and their leaderships, not only accepting the idea, but also hoping to promote it and to make it their own, is awesome. And that's the only word I can find to describe what I felt when I went in there.
Rabbi Parnes?
You covered it well, yes. I was struck by exactly that. I was also struck by the fact that we already have that in Jerusalem. The three religions are there. We need to bring the others with us, but the three religions are there. That edifice being there as well would be a great opportunity to advertise that reality. And all I'll say is that a number of years ago, one of my many visits to Jerusalem, visiting family there, I was at the Western Wall on a Friday night, welcoming the Sabbath. And at the time that I was doing that, at the time that we started our prayers, at that moment, the call to prayer came out from the Muslim community. And at that moment, the bells rang in the cathedral close by. And I was struck by, wow, that's what it should all be about. And I think the Tower of God is designed to epitomize that concept. So I think it would be a great idea. It's there. It would just be nice to have an edifice like that to sort of signify.
Your Grace?
Well, I'd been to the Tower of God before, but the context was very important here. To be there with yourselves, to be in the Tower of God, which presents this really a dream, a model, a vision of how the world's religions, the monotheistic religions, these can walk together and work together and have these common foundations. And to do so at a time when there is so much conflict, which has a religious overlay in the world today, is very meaningful. Your Royal Highness, you mentioned, you're not a man of the cloth. We cannot leave conversation about the depth of our religious traditions and their impact to religious leaders. It's essential that political leaders, that leaders in our society are in those conversations and appealing to those religious values. And so, I mean, one question that arises for me out of the encounter, and in some sense an insight, is that the greatest challenge that the one God, who we all believe in, gives us is to be able to live together, to live well in a flourishing way, and how incredibly difficult that has been through all of human history.
You know, my own sense when I walk through the Tower of God, as I've done a few times, is how impactful it is to have this community of faiths translated in such a small space. You know, it doesn't take a skyscraper or many football fields of symbols to make the point. 3 simple walls, side by side. Absolutely amazing.
Absolutely.
Well, maybe I can move the discussion on just a little bit. It's all well and good, as you have described the common objective. But we have all witnessed how people of different faiths may so readily exhibit hatred toward each other. We've seen recent explosions of that phenomenon. Why is it so easy for what may be accepted by the adherents of the faiths as is all good, but the events on the ground suddenly produce something quite different? Why is that? And what more can the religious communities, and I suppose the political communities, but the religious communities do to make that less likely? Rabbi Parnes, you want to take a crack at that one?
Sure. First of all, I think that it's just an excuse. Faith is the people who do this are using faith as an excuse, and I think the excuse comes out of an understanding. I recently had a conversation with my community. Is it possible for truth and peace to coexist? And I mean, everybody said, of course. And I'm going, well, stop and think about that for a minute. Because your truth is not necessarily my truth or somebody else's truth. We all have our own truths. To put it in a nutshell, in heaven, there's truth. On earth, there are truths. It is incumbent upon us, I believe, to enter into deep discussion, conversation, and understanding of our respective truths, because they're all part of the overall truth, if you will. And that can only come when we interact, when we converse, when we get together, as opposed to if we keep isolating ourselves into silos, into our own, what's the modern term, echo chambers. That's, I think, one of the biggest reasons for that. Somebody said, so what would you do to change it? And I said, I have this dream. I'm going to start a new concept. It's called Let's Have Coffee. Let's get out of uniforms. Let's get out of whatever it is. And let's actually get to meet each other just as people, and begin to get to know each other and see what that might be, what might come from that. My experience has been, it has changed the equation for me with many, and with me as well.
Yeah, I think one thing that, from a Muslim perspective, it's who is interpreting religion. And I think this is where the spoilers come in, and try to spoil it for all of us. They're selective in what they pick out of whatever teachings or sayings may be attributed to their religious leader or prophet or whatever it is, to serve their own purposes, rather than looking at the general message that the religion brings, which is peace and prosperity for all, and emphasis that we are all human beings together. And one of the verses in Islam is, O mankind, we created you as a man and a woman and made you into tribes and nations so that you might get to know each other. Those of you who are closest to God are the pious ones. And God is all-knowing and all-encompassing in His knowledge. That's the principle that, as Muslims, we should be looking forward to. Not just it is we and them, but rather as we all together. But the spoilers will say, aha, no, this is what else is said in the Quran, and they interpret it in their own way, that revelation may have come for a specific purpose at a specific time, but they try to apply it to us today. And hence you have the differences and the hatred, as you said, and animosity that comes out of this uniquely malicious intent on the part of the spoilers.
Can you relate to that, Your Grace?
Sure. I mean, I think one thought I'd introduce to the conversation is that when we look at the world's religious traditions, we can look at their ideals, the revelation, the core values, and we can look at the reality of the history of how those have been lived out. And there's always a significant gap between those. I mean, one of the blessings of constantly returning to what we refer to as the Old Testament prophets is that there was such an ability within ancient Israel to hear God critiquing their actions. And that need for internal critique is a summons to integrity from within each religious tradition. And of course, we're constantly and always falling short, but how we deal with our failings and our shortcomings is absolutely vital. The other point I'd add, building on your wonderful idea of having coffee, is Pope Francis calls it.
As well.
Pope Francis calls it building a culture of encounter, but the absolute importance of events like this, the need to encounter the other. From the Catholic, within the Catholic Church, the Second Vatican Council, 1962 to 65, was so vital because it invited an outward turn. And one of the big things that happened was that not Jews and not Muslims, but at that point at least, Christians from other communities were invited to send observers. And that shaped the whole discourse because the bishops who were there were having this conversation in the presence of these other religious leaders, and therefore learned to speak about them in a different and more respectful way. Likewise, when we have conversations about the future, about peace, to never have those conversations with the other completely separate, but in the presence of the other, and so that we can see the humanity and the integrity of the other. And that opens a way of walking together, I think.
Beautiful.
I think here image is important. And I'm reminded of the late King Abdullah's congregating these different faiths in Spain under one roof.
Right.
And seeing them there sitting next to each other, all of them, different faiths, different traditions, some of them believing in God, some of them believing in other things and so on, was just so significant that we can sit together.
And courageous.
And we can talk to each other openly. Yes. And engage with each other and have a message for the rest of humanity. Mm-hmm. So image is important as well as discussion in a closed session like this.
Mm-hmm.
I'm struck by a couple of things. I mean, we have a discussion in a context. It's a narrow context. We're all living today, and we lived a few years in the past. Some of us more than others, but still in the greater sweep of human history, a very short period of time. One of the realities of the religious interplay over the last 2,000 years has seen a lot of history, much of it troubled and much of it abusive. So, you know, in addition to the spoilers being able to kind of point to a verse in the Quran or other scriptures to make their point, they can also point to these abuses and bad historical records. They simply exist. But there's a huge education issue that is somewhat related to this, that goes beyond mere faith, does it not? Archbishop?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think we're always dealing with the past. The past comes with us. And so we need to find ways to heal past wounds and conflicts, to heal memories. And part of that requires that we come into conversation with the other with a genuine humility for our failures towards the other, our lack of respect.
Or as I would say, being prepared to discuss not only common elements, but differences. Because that word candid you just used is so critical. Rabbi?
You took to the past. Now, I'm one of my sports, I was a competitive oarsman. I used to row in college.
That's why you have a big shoulders.
Yeah. And in Hebrew, when we talk about the days to come, we say Yamim Haronim, which means the days behind us. So we see of the future we think of the future as being behind us, and the past being in front of us. Lifnei. And so as an oarsman, I can really appreciate that because I can see where I was. I have no idea where I'm going, right? And I like that vision because that's what the past is for. It's not so that we can continue to be stuck in it, but rather that we can use that to launch forward for a better future, right? And so I've been sort of holding that vision in my own mind for a long time, and I think that's a key to this as well.
One thing I think I find, not just myself, but how others react to it is interesting. And people no longer believe, in general, and not just among Muslims, but I think in other religions as well, that there is a Satan. And if you have faith in your scripture, I believe you should believe that there is a Satan. Now, whether that Satan is a devil, as an angel, a fallen angel, or whatever, or a Satan of the humankind, but it is there that will try to play with the minds of people to his advantage or her advantage. So that is something I don't see discussed anymore in religious terms. That's one of the things that you mentioned about differences, for example, or similarities.
Or similar.
And so it would be wonderful for people of the cloth, if I may use that term, to pay attention to that as well, and keep us aware in our teachings, in those who go to the church or the mosque or the synagogue, to be warned and alerted and beware, as we're made aware of, for example, when we wear masks against COVID, or take vaccination against influenza. Well, I think that aspect is never, I see it discussed nowadays. It's as if you believe in that, you're way behind in the times and so on.
Yeah, that's a wonderful point. I've have the privilege of being involved in some conversations on a national or international level, Jewish Catholic conversations and Muslim Catholic conversations. We discuss a vision of God, we discuss common good, but I've never had a conversation about how we understand the reality of evil.
Yes.
And how we respond to and combat evil from within our religious traditions. And I think that would be an interesting conversation. And there are resources within our traditions to do that.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
maybe just move to a slightly different topic. Much in the news, the political Abraham Accords, which have happened over the last half a dozen years and are very
Even
much,
less than that.
and are very much present now. Do you think that the Abraham Accords can help to resolve religious misunderstandings? Or is it the other way around, that it's up to religion not to be part of the problem, but part of the solution? So which comes first, the chicken or the egg here?
Well, let me just make a point clear as a personal opinion. I think calling it the Abrahamic faith or the Abrahamic whatever agreement or whatever is a misnomer, in the sense that sure, there are Jews, Christians, and Muslims who followed Abraham and so on, and hopefully by bringing them together again, we can all agree that the faith of Abraham is our faith and so on. But I think, and this is, I think, the essence of following a certain faith, that inasmuch as we have commonalities between us, yet we do have differences that distinguish us from each other. Now, when Abraham was alive, there were no Jews, Muslims, and Christians. There was just Abraham and the teachings of God that he received, whether you want to call them Jewish or Muslim or Christian, each of us can lay claim to it. So I think it gives the whole effort, it politicizes the idea of Abraham in a worldly setting that is yet to progress towards having a good understanding of what Abraham was to all of us. So that's my starting point. And so what I say about that is, as far as Saudi Arabia is concerned, the politics of the Middle East is solvable if there is goodwill on the part not just of the inhabitants of the Middle East, but also the world community, to say enough is enough. The bloodletting that has been going on for 3/4 of a century at least, if not more of that, has to stop. How can we afford to go on killing each other in the thousands in the 21st century? And from that perspective, there is a responsibility on not just people of faith who believe in God and so on, but others who equally should have an interest in peace as a general principle, to work together. And religion is not an obstacle to that, in my view. Being a Muslim and a Jew and a Christian should not prevent us from coming together and saying enough is enough, and identifying who is doing what to whom, and not letting the spoilers take advantage of the situation to highlight the differences between us. I don't know if I'm am I explaining it in the right way or not?
Let me just ask a follow-up question
Sure.
before turning to the other two gentlemen. Does that mean that you basically think that it's a bad thing to kind of mix religion and politics in the discussion?
No, that's why I was asking if I made myself understood or not. I think people of faith can contribute positively to political process and achievement. However, we should not by force of that, expect that people of religion would be wonderfully knowledgeable about politics.
You first.
Unquestionably, I think that we can do those things. We can come together. It's clear that's possible. I'm always reminded, and I reminded my community, it was Ishmael and Isaac came together to bury their father.
Absolutely.
Okay, so absolutely it can be so. And as far as the spoilers are concerned, I lived in London, England, which is where I'm from, of course. I lived in London through the IRA and the problems with the IRA. In fact, as I had forgotten until I'm not forgotten, I just didn't have any reason to discuss it, was driving through Regent's Park, and I had come through Regent's Park to where I was going. About a minute after I left the gate at the park, a bomb went off, the IRA. And today, we don't get searched. Our bags are not searched when we go into stores or buildings in London. None of those things are happening. It does get resolved. It's painful. It takes time. The spoilers don't give up easy, but it is possible, and we have seen a solution. Please God, we will see it
I hope so.
sooner rather than later in the Middle East as well. But yes, we can be involved. As you say, we don't necessarily always appreciate the political nuances, but I think sometimes it would be nice to get rid of the political theatre and back to the coffee, perhaps. That would be helpful.
You know how coffee started? It started as a stimulant for the Sufi orders in Mecca. It had a religious connotation from the Sufi orders who drank coffee to go into the, heavenly trance.
They would do
to be
zikr.
Connected
With
to
zikr.
God and so on.
Yeah.
And one of the ironies, I'm sorry to disturb, but I think it's interesting, is that when coffee started spreading from Mecca among the pilgrims to Egypt, and from Egypt to Istanbul, this is in the 15th century or so, and from Istanbul to Vienna because of the siege of Vienna by the Ottomans, and from Vienna then to London, Rome, etc. Everywhere it passed, it was denounced by religious leaders.
We can learn too.
It shows you how much they knew.
Absolutely.
This religious leader wouldn't get through the day without a massive headache. I think that, not only does religious traditions have a place in informing political decision-making and political visioning, but religions emerged out of political contexts. And, Jesus' teaching emerged in a context of Roman occupation of then Palestine. And that Roman influence and the fact that he's in Israel as a person under oppression shaped those teachings. Religious traditions and statements today come out of political contexts. But having a healthy relationship between religion and politics is vital.
Vital and
Difficult.
not often enough seen.
Difficult.
Difficult.
Actually, I think it starts with, from a religious perspective, for example, we have the Day of Atonement, Yom Kippur, where we look to being better in the new year, forgiveness for sins and things like that. It speaks to not pointing the finger to the other and saying, if only they do this. It speaks to, how am I doing, rather than how are they doing. I think that would make a huge difference to the process.
What do the three of you think about, let me back up a second. All of you seem to agree that conversations such as this are useful, are important. How well, is that really going on? It's going on fine here right now. But at different levels of society and your own communities, does there need, how can we encourage more such conversations is, I guess, my question. Archbishop?
Yeah, that's an ongoing challenge and task. Certainly the openness that the Catholic Church has expressed to entering into dialogue with other faiths is not that well known even among Catholics. I brought some notes of basic principles of Catholic engagement, and the opening sentence is, Catholics are obliged by faith to engage others in dialogue. And yet that would not be the common understanding of many Catholics in our communities. So we have work to do to be faith communities who are actively in dialogue and encourage our people to be engaged in encounter and dialogue with others.
Absolutely. We have been, I consider that the biggest part of my obligation to my community is interfaith work. Reaching out, connecting with others, having these conversations, learning from others, developing, and bringing it back to the community and then expanding it. And we've actually had in our community, of course, we've got together and done a few things, and not necessarily strictly religious. I mean, one evening we had at the Synagogue where we spoke about Leonard Cohen and his work, right? Because we both have a particular interest in his music, but how did we understand some of the things that he wrote and sang? But at the same time, I had a Children of Abraham evening where three of us got together. Someone well known in Regina in Canada now is Zaka Nawaz, and Carla Blakely, a minister here. We got together as siblings, as children of Abraham, and had a dinner where we invited and had Muslim, Jewish, and Christian people just came and had dinner with us. And we even put out little spiritual pursuit, as opposed to trivial pursuit questions, where we had questions about Islam and questions about Judaism and Christianity that they could play the game together at the tables. We need to do more of that. We need to do much more of that.
I second what both of you said on that. There's far too much to do still to get people to know where we are coming from and where we want to go and how to go there. Seems to my thinking many in the world population are just too engaged in other things and not really interested in pursuing these matters or thinking that these matters affect them somehow or other. So I think we need to do more rather than less of these sessions, and to be generally exposed to the public, not simply to a small community of people who agree with those ideas. You have to reach those who either don't know about it or even those who don't agree.
Yeah.
Those who don't want to be engaged with others. This is something I think that the faith communities should strive more to do of.
Maybe we'll turn, let me do it this way. I've got a wrap-up question, but before I turn to that, are there other things that any of the three of you would like to put on the table or ask each other? Because I'm up for that.
One of the things I'm interested in is youth and how to reach youth. They're the people of the future. They're the ones who are going to inherit the earth when we pass away. That is something I think that each of our faiths can learn about from each other. How do you deal with your youth? And let's see if we can find ways of bringing them into places of worship, rather than them shying away from them, either because of peer pressure or because of media hype or whatever you want, or because of caricaturizing, as we see in many places. some caricaturize Christians or Jews or Muslims or Hindus or whatever. It's very important, I think, to be close to the youth and not to have a gap between them and the rest of us.
Your race?
Well, I resonate with your remarks. It's vital that we find ways to speak with and listen to youth, to find out what their deepest concerns are, and to get their input and insights into the future, and also as religious communities to embody the integrity that the world needs in terms of the pursuit of justice, of healthy environment, of addressing poverty. So it's also a time when youth are growing up in the midst of increasing polarization, and ways in which that polarization gets deepened easily. So the need to break through that and to cultivate something that I think youth come to naturally, the desire to be in dialogue with and encounter others.
Absolutely.
Not so easy to solve this youth issue.
Not at all. I've come to the conclusion, I used to teach my students who come to Bar Mitzvah at the age of 12 for girls and 13 for boys, where they sort of accept and take on maturity as the beginning of adulthood, as it were, at that age, and they study a little bit with me, and they come to the synagogue and they read from the scroll and so on. And I used to have this great curriculum for that. I now have a new curriculum, and the new curriculum is a blank page. And I give them a blank page, and now I invite them to write down every question they have about religion, about God, about anything related that they have an interest in. And that becomes the curriculum. It occurs to me that, we need to invite our youth to become more curious, to ask questions, as opposed to do as you're told because I said so. And we need to, if we get them to ask the questions, then the answers are going to be much more meaningful to them and will resonate, I think, more. So I've been doing more of that, and it's working. It has been working. In fact, my students are now coming back into a high school class with me because they want to do more, which is exciting. But we'll see. It's still an experiment, right? So but we need to do more of that.
Well, thanks for raising that. Let me close the session by looping back to where we began. We started talking about the fact that you have toured this morning the Tower of God. We talked about how that impressed you. So I want to come back to the 1975 vision that Father Murray carried to your father,
Yes.
Your Royal Highness. Is it worth keeping that vision alive, not just in this room, but more broadly? Should it be kept alive? The idea of some even more tangible evidence of the common religions in Jerusalem? And if so, how ought that to happen?
Well, I think from my perspective, I remember one of the things that the late King Faisal wished for when he met with Mr. Kissinger after the 73 war. Kissinger asked him, Your Majesty, will you please bring to fruition a wish that I have, which is for you to end the embargo. And His Majesty turned to him and he said, Mr. Kissinger, would you bring to reality a wish that I have to go pray in the Aqsa Mosque? This was just after a war between Israel and the Arab countries.
Yeah.
So that's a wish that I carry from those days, and I hope it will come in my lifetime. But that is something, I don't know if it will be ever accomplished.
Rabbi?
You know, we think about these differences and the barriers that come up because of them. We think about the reconciliation and how does one do that with the indigenous communities here in Saskatchewan. I've been studying with one of my teachers here in Regina who's still teaching me.
MashaAllah.
He's 98. He's still writing and teaching. And we talked about that. I said, you know, the problem I have is whether it's the indigenous communities here in Regina, in Saskatchewan, whether it's the history, the bitter history that we have in the Middle East. I wasn't there, right? I mean, I was there in 73, I was there in 67, but I wasn't there 2,000 years ago. I wasn't there for any of this. Mm-hmm. It's really hard to do an apology for something that you weren't there for. So I said, how do we address that? And we thought about it, both of us talked back and forth quite a bit, which is where this coffee and conversation comes in. And we concluded, I believe now, every decision I make from this point has to answer the question, will my children have to apologize for my actions going forward? And that's going to be my underlying question of myself when I decide how I'm going forward. And I think the Tower of God might help us to center ourselves into that process.
Well, Archbishop, you get to have the final word here this afternoon, as you got to have the first word. So.
You're very kind. I noticed when I visited Jerusalem years ago that the painful history of relations between our traditions are all physically present in Jerusalem. I remembered seeing a sign about the Crusades. When I studied in England, I felt like there were indications there, physical indications, that the Reformation happened like last week. And those in some sense monuments to our painful history in Jerusalem are so striking. So to have some kind of a monument that could indicate the common foundations of our faith in one God would be a powerful thing. I also think, though, that it's not something that we are necessarily able to do, but we are able to build different kinds of monuments, each in our own place, different kinds of tangible evidence of the dialogue and the respect and the need to work together for the common good out of the depths of our own traditions. So it's a task that we can't just put onto Jerusalem, but that we have to do here in Wilcox and in Regina and in each place where we reside.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much, all three of you. It's been an illuminating session, and one that I hope is the kind of dialogue that can inform many other interfaith efforts to come. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Dear Notre, we hail the alma mater, thy loyal house, thy banners proudly bear. We pledge to